Now to President Trump's taxes. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow last night released part of Donald Trump's 2005 tax return. President not happy about it, or at least that's what he says, and just about everyone else wants to see a whole lot more of it.
Today, President Trump gets out of Washington and travels to Detroit as 2 pages of his income taxes from more than a decade ago are out. He's spent the last year during the campaign refusing to release them.
Well, I'm not releasing the tax returns because, as you know, they're under audit.
But now that he's president, there's an IRS requirement that all presidents and vice presidents since the 1970s get audited every year.
Yes or no, do you believe voters have a right to see your tax returns before they make a final decision?
I don't think they do.
But now a glimpse into Trump's 2005 tax returns. It shows an income of nearly $153 million. He ended up paying $38 million in federal taxes. Trump's tax rate, about 25%, and he declared $103 million in losses.
Came in the mail over the transom.
On MSNBC, independent journalist David K. Johnston says he received the 2-page tax summary in the mail anonymously. Johnston talked about it this morning on Good Morning America.
Everybody else who's prosperous in America is on the alternative minimum tax. If that tax hadn't existed, Donald Trump would have paid a tax rate on his $153 million lower than the average paid by the poorest half of Americans.
This morning, Trump going off on Johnston, tweeting, "Does anybody really believe that a reporter who nobody ever heard of went to his mailbox and found my tax returns? Fake news." But what we can believe is that the document is accurate. The White House confirms the accuracy of the leaked document, but says it was illegally obtained.
One of the big takeaways that a lot of people got from that report last night is that there was no big smoking gun. There was no one conclusive bit of evidence that had Trump on Putin's payroll or getting money from some sort of illicit source or anything like that. But there are takeaways from that report and from the tax report. Perhaps one of those headlines is something called the AMT. It stands for the Alternative Minimum Tax. It's also something that President Trump says he wants to abolish. And most of what Trump paid in that year, in 2005, was paid because of the AMT. The tax was introduced in 1970. Its sole purpose is to even out the system by making wealthy people pay rates that are comparable to the rest of his workers. So one thing that the release of the 2005 return showed us is why we need to see a lot more about his taxes, and for any number of reasons. First of all, it would be nice to know how much money he gave to charity or what kind of write-offs he had, but primarily to see the source of his income and find out exactly what it is. There's a report today that Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, is about to profit handsomely off of a Chinese real estate deal. There are also reports that, Russian oligarch bought one of Trump's mansions for decidedly more than he paid for it. There are lots of different stories that make you wonder about what his income is. First of all, let's go around, and I just want to get a sense, should we see his tax returns, Jeannie?
I do think that we are going to see his tax returns. Whether we should, I think, is a different question. I think, what I would say is liberals have to be very, very careful about making hay out of this, and then you get releases and they don't amount to too much. And so I think that's where we could see something interesting. I go back and forth on whether candidates should release. I like them to do it of their own volition, but if they choose not to, I have real challenges in terms of telling people they have to release. Certainly, I would support it if it passed legislation, but we haven't seen anything like that.
But Richard, let's take the one example that we know of from that tax return, which is the AMT. Trump would have paid something like $5 or $6 million or less had it not been for the AMT, and now he wound up paying $153 million instead. And oh, by the way, he wants to get rid of it, that particular tax. That's one of those issues that leads to questions as to whether he's governing for the benefit of everybody or governing for the benefit of himself.
Well, I would say I know I'm familiar with the alternative minimum tax. Yeah. And I'm a small business owner, so if you want to change it up, that will be helpful to a lot of people in my category, Dominic's category.
Well, the debate is making the AMT kick in at a higher level. It does impact people who are small business owners or in the middle class.
I didn't mean to interrupt. But what the AMT is really for, and I found out the hard way about it one year, and I was like, oh.
All that money's gone?
Right.
Exactly.
What it's really for is someone, I'm not going to say wealthy, but you do have to have X amount of income. Mm-hmm. But what it's really for is, if let's say you have a business and the business has, let's just say for argument's sake, $200,000 in income. Well, there are some people who say, well, I got $500,000 in expenses. And without the AMT, they would automatically be able to claim that on their taxes. So when you have a certain amount of income, the AMT, again, I found this out the hard way when I tried to do, since I'm being full disclosure, I tried to do X amount of deductions, and the government says, oh, no, Mr. Carter, you can't write off, we're going to stop your deductions at this point.
Yep. And so.
Did you find out the hard way,
yes,
too?
Yes, I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a big number.
You didn't know they're billionaires.
And you don't have to be a millionaire. I'll tell you that
But
much.
Donald Trump's not looking to reform the AMT or raise that threshold so that folks who are small business owners or who are middle class or whatever aren't impacted by it. He wants to abandon the entire thing.
Well, let it work its way through Congress, and I'm not. There will be some reforms.
Richard,
but
now
I'm in
working
for.
its way through Congress is becoming the default. Like,
But he has to.
That's a Sean Spicer. That's a Sean Spicer.
It has. You have
Ask
to.
Congress, and the
You have
president is
to amend the IRS code.
The president
He
is
said he wants to do
advocating
that.
for this policy. He's advocating for a policy that will benefit himself.
And that will benefit millions of
Yes,
Americans.
but I'm not asking about millions of people. I'm asking about him benefiting himself and whether we know whether that's what's guiding his decision.
Well, look, no. At the time, he said that he's a businessman. Okay. Right now, he's the president of the United States, so he knows as a business person, this will eliminating AMT or reforming it will benefit millions of people, including business owners. And if I have more money in my pocket as a business owner, I'm hiring more people.
Andrew, if you get rid of the AMT, again, it's self-serving with the president when he says he wants to get rid of it. Of course he wants to get rid of it, because if you get rid of the AMT, it doesn't automatically alarm the system, and you can deduct as many expenses as you want. Again, it's important to understand, it caps off what you can deduct for your expenses. If somebody like Trump says, I lost $500 million, he's going to write off $500 million. That's why you have an AMT. It's very crucial and very needed.
But I think the bigger issue with the tax returns is not necessarily changing tax policy and benefiting him. I quite frankly, I don't care, because Donald Trump is going to do very well regardless of whether the AMT is changed or not. And to Richard's point, you can have a very strong argument for getting rid of that thing. I think the more important issue is, who was he doing business with, particularly overseas, and was there any collusion during the campaign, particularly with the Russians? Those are the real questions people are interested in. And that's why 2005 doesn't get us very far. You need to see the more recent ones, and I think this is a sign we probably will see them.
And we didn't get answers from that from last night, which is why I've sort of focused on what we did get from it as opposed to what we didn't.
Always depending on the doctor to bring us back to
Yes,
reality.
reality.
The real issue is whether a conflict of interest it results.
25% tax rate. I mean, Mitt Romney paid a lot less and got caught up in that in 2012. It's a lower rate than I paid. I mean, I don't know about the rest of the table. Any blowback on the president for paying 25%?
I don't think you can. I have a problem criticizing people for playing by the rules. These are the rules. He did everything legal, and he got to pay 25%. That maybe should be changed, but I don't think he can be criticized. I think he came out okay with this release.
And Warren Buffett pays less than that in taxes because how he earns his money. It all depends on how you earn your money. If you earn your money on investments, you pay less taxes.
But 25%, okay, that's fine. Show me the money, because I guarantee you there's something there. I bet my life on it. There's something in those returns that Mr. Trump is hiding from the American people.
Finally, Richard, Richard, I tend to give you a hard time because you're always taking the Republican, like you have to represent the entire Republican Party for good or for bad. So I'll put this one on a T for you.
It's like family.
I'll put this one on. Donald Trump made $153 million in the year 2005. There were some people questioning whether he really was worth what he was worth. Is this, I mean, does this report a net positive that came out last night for Donald Trump?
It's a net nothing, actually. It doesn't change people. The way people felt about Donald Trump before, they're going to feel that way after this tax return, too. This does nothing.
I'm not so sure, because the more the media takes a swing at it or gets a leak like this in drips, as you've been saying, and there's no there's just a little bit of smoke, there's not a whole lot of fire, I think that makes people less receptive to the next little bit of information that comes out.
I think he comes, I can see what your point, I just think it bodes better for Donald Trump, the release last night, because there was nothing there. Right. And when you keep doing that, people start to just yawn and say the media is all hype, we're all hyped up for this release, and there's nothing there.
It's like crying wolf.
But Andrew, we've been in this game a long time. Keep in mind, we don't know who did the leaking. Keep that in mind. With the professor's point, that 1 year, why 2005? It was very self-serving for the president. There was nothing there. So the question becomes, if the returns ended up in the mailbox, who put them there? I'm not so sure it was a critic of Mr. Trump.
On a completely unrelated note, you've reported and covered Donald Trump for a long time. Has he ever mailed you anything?
Oh, yes, he has.
Has he ever tipped you to anything?
Tip as far as what?
Here's a news tip. Here's a little juicy news tip. Here's something you didn't know that maybe you can report.
Yes, but like, in fairness to him, like Rudy Giuliani used to tip information a lot. But what he would say is, you got to say sources close to the mayor. You can't report it, that it's actually from the mayor. So they all do it.
Okay.
All powerful politicians. Trump, his main thing whenever we would talk privately is he would always say to me, frankly, I'm going to be honest, he would talk about women, or in the way that we've seen publicly.
That is shocking. Stop it.
or he would talk
Where are the
about,
tapes?
or he would talk about how popular he was, and he would be able to tell me exactly what poll, and he would laugh at that.
I have no idea what prompted me to ask that question.
Yeah, I have no idea
can't
either,
think. All right, we'll take a break.
That's a great
Tell me to
question.
read the book. Read your book.
When we come back,
book on Trump.
the race is on to succeed Chris Christie. We're going to look at the candidates and who's leading in the horse race.